Hey everybody, welcome back to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center and welcome back to some Snappy Jays. It is the first day of practice here in March for Ohio State. First spring practice underway this morning. We got to see half an hour of that and evaluate that with some instant reactions. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. So what do we see, Bill?
Wasn't it like 70 degrees yesterday?
Yeah, it was beautiful.
It's cold out here, man. So they kick us out before like all the cool like team stuff happens, but I did get a glimpse at who was lining up with the first team defense on the first team.
Tell me about
first day of spring practice. Would you like some names?
I'd love it.
JT Tuimoloau.
Okay.
Ty Hamilton. Tyleek Williams. Jack Sawyer.
At defensive end.
At defensive end. Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke at cornerback.
Okay.
Linebackers, Cody Simon and Steele Chambers. Safeties, Lathan Ransom, Josh Proctor, and Cameron Martinez.
Wow. How about that?
You know what? I guess my first thought is I'm beginning to wonder about some priorities around here. Like CJ Stroud's not here. That's weird, right? Yeah. I didn't see Jackson Smith and Jigba.
No.
I just don't know if these guys are taking this seriously. I think it's good.
Hey, they're not on the team anymore.
If those guys are not here, then I guess it's good that Devin Brown and Kyle McCord were energetic and upbeat. Devin Brown wearing number 33, throwback to his prep football days, and I mean I guess this is still prep football. His younger days, but it's an homage to Sammy Baugh, the first Hall of Fame quarterback ever. So I guess if you want to have a question about where Devin Brown's confidence is coming into this spring, that's maybe a telltale sign. I'm always looking at the freshmen because that's, the guys I
young dudes
have been more recently, in contact with. And I'm stunned at just how big Noah Rogers and Carnell Tate look for freshman wide receivers, especially, I guess, compared to last year's group, which still look sort of like they're not ready to be physically in the mix at Ohio State. That was a kind of eye-opening to me. And then Davis and Igbinosun as far as the corner.
That's a big dude.
So he's wearing number 20. Sonny Styles is wearing number 6. And I thought Igbinosun was Sonny Styles because he looked exactly like him. That is telling. Obviously he's going to be trying to get into the mix and the rotation with Hancock and Burke penciled in, I think, as the starters. But that dude was physically impressive.
Yeah, Berm was over by me and he said, "Did you see Igbinosun yet?" And I'm like, "You mean strong Eli Apple?" Like this, he's put together. Now he wasn't out there first. The returning guys, Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock were, but you can see him pretty much jumping right into that mix with 3 corners right away, even after day one. Just physically, you assume that he'd be able to do it. We'll see. There's a long way till they play a game. I thought Caleb Brown, of those guys that you mentioned from a year ago, Berm, I thought maybe he looked like he had maximized it the most. He was getting looked good moving around on the punt return stuff. It was hard to really evaluate much else.
Was he the first one?
Yeah. I thought that
him and Marvin.
Well, and let's stop.
Did you know that Marvin Harrison was returning punts?
Let's get this on the table right now. You know how I feel about Ohio State wanting to correct the punt return game. Do not try and solve that problem with Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm begging you, Parker Fleming, and anyone listening who wants to tweet at Parker Fleming, do not put Marvin Harrison on punt return, please.
Looked like he was going to house the first one.
I'm going to guess that they were just giving Marv something to do while they were doing punt period.
I think they just wanted to make sure that the guy back there in punt drill caught the ball.
If it doesn't hit the ceiling.
Right.
So Caleb Brown was in that mix. Jalen Ballard was in that mix.
Obviously, Emeka Ibuka's not participating, so he would be back there rather than Marvin.
Xavier Johnson got so they got a lot of guys reps, a lot more than they normally would, and I think that Bill is probably right. It was giving people something to do. That was sort of my overall takeaway from the way that this practice was structured. There was constant movement going on for Ohio State. A lot of it was fundamental stuff that we saw, obviously, and it's day one. You don't have full pads on, but I think the way they set it up, there were 10 stations out there, and everybody was getting a bunch of reps in a row. That was good fundamental work. It felt like it was more active than I remember in years past. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just a recency bias for today. But I thought that they had set it up in a way. They were doing different drills than I'd seen before. That, even the way that they were stretching with getting up off one knee and running and competing was different than I remember seeing from this team. And we do get to see a lot of stretching. So that stands out for sure.
Experts.
We're
experts at that. That was a change. What does it mean? I have no idea, but it was different, and certainly they tried to shake things up. Quinn Temple wasn't on the microphone. Super weird.
Yeah.
Bring him back.
For me, when we get early spring practice, I'm always kind of amazed at how physically different guys can look in such a short period of time. from the last time we saw them. The one guy, Caden Curry, he looks like he's about 20 pounds heavier than he was at the end of the Georgia game, and certainly looks like he's carrying it well. It's not like he all of a sudden looks chunky or anything, but if he wants to be a more regular contributor at defensive end, he's going to need to get that body weight up a little bit. Certainly don't want to see it go too much farther, because I think they have him listed on the roster at 259, and I think last year he was at like 242 or something. So that's a kid that, you know, they're going to try to move around, but I always feel bad for him because when they start with punt drill, all the other defensive linemen are working on defensive line stuff,
Yeah.
and he's set up as a
Shield
on the punt team along with Cade Stover. So when you just look at physically, was there anyone else that really struck out or stood out to you guys as far as just looked different?
look different. I mean, I'll say, listen, I understand what it looks like and sounds like when a guy who looks like this is talking about what football players look like, but I thought Jack Sawyer was carrying his weight a little better. Like he looked a little more chiseled up, a little more carved up. Slab of beef, yeah. So he's listed at 265, I think, which is about where he was last year. So he hasn't like added on anything, and he looks transformed in that sort of 6'4", 265-pound package, if you will.
You know, there's a lot of staff alignment changes, and people always talk about it, but there's a couple guys different in the strength room, and I wonder if that energy is a little different than we saw in the last couple of years with Quinn Barham, who's obviously great, but he's now at Coastal Carolina, and they have some new energy in there and a little bit more juice, it seemed like.
Seemed like it,
Yeah, outside of the ones that I've already mentioned, I would say probably Dallin Hayden, upper body wise. He came in more mature than most freshmen a year ago, and we know that. And we saw what he did in November. But it looked like some more bulk and definition in the upper arm. Again, I'm not an expert on that stuff. Don't take me for that when it comes to physical prowess and workouts. But he looks different than a year ago. You saw him going through the ball security drills, and the bats in everybody's arms were just flying off of his arms. He looked like he was ready to go. I would say it starts there. On the offensive line, don't know how different necessarily it was, but just trying to get a glimpse at what that first five could look like. It seems like Carson Hinsman has a chance, at least for now. Luke Whippler mentioned this on Friday last week in Indianapolis, that he thinks that Jacob James eventually will claim that job. We'll see how that goes, but Carson Hinsman and Vic Cutler were getting those first snapping opportunities today. They handled it fine. That wasn't live. I don't know what else to say about it, but Zin Michalski, from what I could tell, at least in the early part, had that first crack at right tackle, so we'll see what that means.
I think offensive line-wise, I mean, Cutler, as I mentioned on Monday's podcast daily, you can tell he needs some time in the weight room here. When you stack him up even against a guy like Luke Montgomery or Austin Sareveld, like he looks like a guy who's behind from a physical standpoint. Obviously, he's played a lot of football, so you know the mental side of the game, he's going to be a little bit ahead of those guys. But I thought it was encouraging to see Padilla and Montgomery and Sareveld look like Ohio State offensive linemen right away. And there wasn't you don't look like at those guys and like, oh, they need to drop or they need to gain weight. And they all three of those guys look really like they fit.
I thought among a group that has some pretty good looking athletes on the defensive line, Kenyatta Jackson stands out above sort of all of them. He's just like super long, levered, broad shouldered, probably 6'5", just a really well put together athlete. And also too, like I thought that we wouldn't see Mitchell Melton do much of anything, and it was all non-contact, but he was doing all of it, and he didn't have a brace on his knee, so that was encouraging to see too.
Yeah.
I mean, even Travion Henderson was out there early part of practice. TC Caffey was out there. Once they went into actual position drills, those guys moved off to the side, but it was encouraging just to see a lot of those guys out there doing stuff.
Yeah, I thought Kyle McCord looked more solid.
Yeah, as expected, Kyle McCord got the first crack at quarterback today. He was going to inherit that lead. We knew that all along. Can he maintain it? How does that look moving forward? I will say that Devin Brown's arm strength flashed a little bit more for me today than it had in the past. It wasn't, on some of the throws that I was watching, it wasn't the most accurate stuff ever. That's a small sample size. I'm not going to read too much into that, but I thought that, as I talked about it in the past, like, well, Kyle McCord's the stronger arm passer, NFL guy. He just doesn't have the mobility. And I've said that they might be closer than people tend to think. I may well still be wrong about that because Devin Brown is so athletically gifted. But I'm saying that because his arm, I thought, was stronger from year one to year two, at least on day one. Kyle McCord was still very accurate. Ball still comes out of his hand really easily and spins it well. But he was doing a lot of just like they're like challenging him to run and doing some of the zone stuff. And even after you give, make sure that you run. And he moves fine. Like he's not a statue.
Do you think that, I agree, Devin looked like he had a little bit more RPMs today than Kyle did, which is surprising. Is that just a redshirt freshman who's like amped up versus a guy who this is his third time and he's like, I don't need to go out and throw the ball?
Yeah, I don't think Kyle McCord was trying to throw it through a wall.
Yeah, I think it was I'm juiced.
I think that's actually an interesting thing to monitor throughout this, because I do think they're similarly talented, but Kyle McCord, just having been through this more, it probably doesn't weigh as much on him as it might weigh on Devin Brown. And if Devin Brown finds himself trying to do a little too much, that can be to his detriment.
Well, you're rolling out there wearing number 33.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Because, again, on the ultimate small sample size, one of these throws that I'm talking about came out really hot. It was spinning, but it was off target, and he reacted to it, like, very upset with himself. Like, it's one throw. Again, reading too much into it, as we do when we get 30 minutes. But, like, I think that he's probably really pressing for that in a way that Kyle isn't. And that's, from the outside looking in, amateur psychologist, probably wrong. But at least that's what I evaluated.
I think he'll settle in. Like, he's certainly not lacking for confidence.
No, that's
He should be settled in right now.
he very well could just
They
learn
just kicked
6
us out
touchdowns.
10 minutes ago. We have no idea what's happening currently.
Yeah, that's true. We will later, though. We're supposed to get some practices and potentially a scrimmage or two this spring. We'll see. We didn't get that today. That's fine. We got a glimpse at the Buckeyes, and then later on, of course, we'll hear from Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, and the quarterbacks themselves. And then also we'll have the show at Roosters. We'll break down what we heard there. So a lot more coverage coming your way on the podcast and at ohiostate.rivals.com of spring practice number 1 for Ohio State. Until then, he's Bill. That's Berm. I'm Austin. We'll talk to you later.